Hello, everyone. Warm welcome. Hope all of you are doing well this morning. Everything on this planet and within our society somehow revolves around relationships. Good ones, bad ones, not having one, seeking one, or even not wanting one. Most of us have read or heard a fairy tale ending with, and they lived happily ever after. Was that a promise, a hope, or a denial? Can we have relationships like that? Joining us today, Sister Kiran is joining us from Eugene, USA. She administers the Brahma Kumari's Peace Sanctuary Meditation Center and is the project manager of the One Link website for BK students. She also conducts regular teachers training, which I was once part of, for BK students who wish to learn the foundation course. So let us all welcome Sister Kiran. Om Shanti. We cannot hear you, sister. You are muted.
Go. The phone was in the background. Sorry.
Yeah. Welcome. Good evening to you.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for inviting me.
So over to you now.
Okay. So the topic that's been given is healthy relationships from a holistic perspective. And I'd like to start with a little story that I recently heard from a colleague of mine. It's a story about a young man who took his father out to dinner at a very fancy restaurant. And as they were eating their dinner, the father was quite elderly and quite feeble, and he wasn't managing very well. His hands were shaking when he tried to put the spoon in his mouth, and food was falling on his jacket, and soup was dribbling down his chin, and he was really kind of making food was falling on the floor. He was really quite clumsy about everything. But the son was not bothered by this at all. However, the other patrons in the restaurant were noticing this, and they were thinking, how disgusting, this old man, he's just, he shouldn't be eating in restaurants, and all this kind of judgment was going on. Anyway, the son and his father happily finished their meal, and then the son took his father to the washroom, and he cleaned him up, and he took the food off of his clothes and everything, and he combed his hair, and then he brought him back and paid his bill. And as they were about to leave the restaurant, one of the other patrons said, "Son, you left something behind." And the son says, "No, I didn't leave anything behind." But the patron says, "Yes, you left something behind." What do you think it was that he left behind? I know we can't be very interactive here, but what he had left behind was a lesson about relationships and about love. And when there's love in relationships, you really overlook so many things, so many defects that other people might find hard to tolerate. But because of love, you can handle them. Love gives you that handling power. So in 1976, I moved from Montana to California to study holistic health. And it was a relatively new field at that time. And of course, we had things like traditional Chinese medicine and Ayurveda, which for centuries were modalities of healing that looked at the whole person. But what had happened with Western medicine, when they discovered that germs can be a cause of disease, the whole shift of focus turned towards fixing germ-caused diseases. And so that meant looking at symptoms, treating symptoms, and that meant a heavy focus on pharmaceuticals, for example, for the treatment of disease. But after a few decades of this, the shortcomings of this approach started to become obvious. For example, some treatments were worse than the disease. And also people with certain conditions, especially chronic ones, were not being helped by this approach. And so then people started to look at more holistic methods. And this brought together for me something very, three things that were always interests of mine my whole life up to that point: physical health and psychological, understanding the human psyche, emotions, and the mind, and understanding spirit. I was very interested in the spiritual realm. And holistic means body, mind, and spirit. So this evening, I'm going to look at relationships from the level of the body, from the level of the mind and emotions, and from the level of spirituality. And I'm hoping that you will take away some really practical things that you can use, even starting today, to help improve the health of your relationships. Okay, so if we look at the body, relationships at the level of the body, I think we know what healthy relationships look like on the physical level. It's when people of whatever background can live together with love and cooperation in peace and harmony. And relationships at the level of the body are based on the senses: appearance, attractiveness, skin color, and things like that, place of birth, so many things. But healthy relationships, even at the level of the body, are free of stress and fear. However, we can see very easily today, because it's so widespread, what are the symptoms of unhealthy relationships at the bodily level. So fear and stress obviously are there, but also things like domestic violence and crime and prejudice, institutionalized or systemic racism, xenophobia, police brutality, gun massacres, war. I think you would agree that all of these are signs of unhealthy, very diseased relationships on the physical level. And to heal relationships at that level is probably the most difficult way of tackling it. But we do have a number of measures that people are undertaking to try and heal things on that level. We tried desegregation, for example, which took care of some of the problem, but it just went to a deeper level. But now we have programs like restorative justice. We have counseling programs for people, abusers, who are perpetrators of domestic violence and things like that. But we can also, because a lot of this behavior on the physical level is unconscious. It's based in people's biases. And biases are largely unconscious. People are not aware of their prejudices and their biases to a great extent. And some of them are very subtle. And biases sort of harden or get embedded into beliefs. And then we get into bigotry and all sorts of bullying and other kinds of negative social behaviors. So one of the things that you can do as a person to help get rid of unhealthy relationships on the physical level is to become aware of your own biases. And there's a handy little tool put out by Harvard called the IAT, the implicit association test, I think it's called. Yes, the implicit association test, the IAT. You can go online, it's free, and you can take it to see what kind of biases you have in terms of racism or gender or religion, things like that. You can check it out there. Because the more you're aware of those unconscious biases that you might have been raised with or that might have been shaped by your culture, then you can start to do something about them. Now, if we go to the level of the mind and the emotions, let's look at unhealthy relationships on this level first, because I think you would all agree with me that when a person tries to control or exert power over another person mentally or emotionally, when they use sarcasm or belittle people in front of others or boss people around or argue or shout loudly, or maybe they give someone the silent treatment, they ignore them. I think you would agree that all of these are not signs of a healthy relationship. I hope you would agree that. And one relationship in particular that is fraught with vulnerabilities is the parent-child relationship. Many parents fall into the trap of wanting to make their child become like them or live up to their expectations or fulfill some who sorry, the internet just went down. I don't know if I'm still on Spotlight or not.
Yeah, you are, sister. Can go ahead.
Is the sound okay?
Yes, the sound is fine.
Okay. So I was starting to tell you about this friend I knew in university, and his father was a big donor of that particular university. In fact, there was a room in the student union that was named the Kimball Room after this guy's dad. And this guy's dad wanted his son to become an engineer. But the son had a passion for music, and especially medieval kind of music. And by the time he was in college, he was already a very accomplished lute player, a lutist. I don't know if you know what a lute is, but it's kind of a medieval sort of instrument. And anyway, the son went ahead and pursued his dream and eventually became a music professor at another university. But during the time that he was at school, at the same time as me, his relationship with his father was really on the rocks because he was not living up to his father's expectations. And so we really need to see how much pressure do we put on our children instead of, I mean, our children are really God's gift to us, right? And we should maybe experiment with thinking about what they have come to teach us instead of what we are going to impart to them. I have a daughter who's now 50 years old, in her 50s, and I always say about her that she brought me up. Not that I raised her, but she brought me up because I learned so much from trying to understand that particular being. So the other thing is that we often raise our children with fear tactics. We say, don't do this, don't do that. We teach them what not to do, but not what to do or how to do it. There's a story about Sigmund Freud. You must have heard of Sigmund Freud. One day he and his wife and son went to a park, and they were enjoying themselves in this park, and it came time to leave, and all of a sudden they couldn't find the little boy, and they're looking and looking for this little boy. Finally, Freud says to his wife, "Did you tell him not to go anywhere?" And the wife said, "Yeah, I told him not to go to the wading pool." And Freud says, "That's where he is." And sure enough, there was the little boy with his feet in the water. So what this illustrates is something called, it's a curious phenomenon. It's called the white bear phenomenon. I don't know if you've heard of this, but some researchers put a bunch of people together in a room, and they told them not to think of white bears. And so for the next half an hour, all these people thought about was, why aren't we supposed to think about white bears? What's the significance of this? I've never even seen a white bear. Why should I not think about one, right? And so what they discovered was that when you give yourself an instruction, or when anybody gives you an instruction, it goes into your working memory. And your working memory doesn't judge where this is good for you or bad for you. It just knows that it's important because it's in your working memory, and you therefore have to think about it. And so then you start thinking about a don't. And you think about it so much that eventually you go and do what it says you shouldn't do, right? It's actually called the ironic something something too. I can't remember the technical name from it. So what do we say to our children? Don't talk to me like that. Don't act like an idiot. We should delete the word don't from our vocabulary, even when we're talking to ourselves. Like, don't eat that, you'll get fat. Don't smoke, don't drink, don't. But what we should do instead is say what we are doing, and tell our children what we want them to do, what we want to happen. And you have to use short, positive, present tense sentences, like, I am doing this now. Not I will do it, or I'm getting to it, but I am doing it. Even if you're not, but saying that, okay, this is what I'm doing now, is what will put that in your memory track and make you think about it and ultimately do it. So if you just say, I will do it, then you're not really giving your memory track something to be serious about. But if you say, I am doing it, then you have to think about doing it. For a silly example for an adult, okay, I'm uncomfortable, I don't like public speaking, right? But instead say, I can speak in public and I do it well, right? And I enjoy it, for example. And willpower kind of helps you and your child develop new behaviors when you start putting instructions in this way, like brush your teeth, or replacement behaviors like, I speak kindly to my children. Because when you use willpower to stop yourself from doing something that you're getting some gratification from, some pleasure from, it does not work very well. But if you use it to do something that you are doing that's positive, then it works well and helps you. So if you put helpful pictures in your working memory, your willpower will help you or your child to, for example, drink juice instead of soda, or finish their homework before going out to play. So you can give them positive instructions that will help them be more motivated. So say what you want the child to do instead in a positive way. And so I hope if you don't take anything else away from tonight, you will delete don't from your vocabulary. Now, we know that healthy relationships are warm and happy and supportive and comforting and lighthearted and sincere, right? And so I'm going to read you a list of characteristics of healthy relationships. And I'm going to read it slowly so you can note them down. And I invite you to use this list to evaluate your current relationships in terms of how healthy they are. So healthy relationships, in healthy relationships, there is trust. You trust each other. Whoever it is, whether it's your partner, your friend, or your child, or whoever. These apply to all relationships. You trust each other, and there is honesty. There's love, and there's respect. Healthy relationships are characterized by realistic expectations and by forgiveness when the others with whom you're in relationship have shortcomings. Another aspect of healthy relationships is authenticity and a positive mindset and humor. Can you be playful and fun with your child, with your partner, with your parents? Do you have a balance of independence and companionship? Because one of the characteristics of unhealthy relationships is a kind of codependency where it's based on need and wants and power and things like that, rather than being you're independent in your own right, but you like to be together, companionship. Another characteristic, sharing responsibility in the relationship. It's not all on your side and it's not all on my side. We share the responsibility. And also, a healthy relationship has effective communication. And that is a shared responsibility because both people have to communicate effectively, both in sending and receiving messages. So verbal skills, active listening, the ability to resolve problems and issues, all this is effective communication. Am I going too fast, or everybody getting a chance to write these things down? I should look at the chat here. It went away when the internet went down. Okay, I don't see any complaints. So another thing about healthy relationships is there's shared values, commonly accepted values that are mutually agreed values, you could say. And in this respect, I wanted to share that I have this friends who are a couple, and they've been married for about 20 years now. And every year, they get married again. I couldn't believe this. But in their hallway, going up the stairs, they have wedding pictures of every single one of their weddings for every single year of their marriage. And what the guy proposes to her, and she accepts, and then they write their vows. And their vows change with time, but they're recommitting to what the basic values are in their relationship. And they renew these vows every year, and they get a different priest to administer their marriage vows, and they find some beautiful place. Sometimes they do it in their home, and they invite their friends, and they have a big dinner and all of that. It's really quite nice way to sustain a relationship over a long time, is revisiting the values that you share together. And lastly, and maybe even most importantly, people in healthy relationships know that they're responsible for their own individual happiness. So they don't blame others for their negative feelings, like, you make me angry, or you made me so angry. You know, nobody makes you angry. You choose to get angry, because you can also choose to not get angry in certain situations. So I came across this very interesting study that was done in 1990 by this man named John Guttam. And what he did was he observed 130 newlywed couples. And he would observe them over the course of a whole day, how they interacted with each other and like that, right? He would just observe them. And he noticed that throughout the day, one of the partners would make a request for a connection with the other person. And this researcher, Gautam, called it a bid. And it would be something like, oh gosh, there's a beautiful bird out there. Can you see it? And he's asking the other person to pay attention to something that he's seeing, right? It's like a bid for that person's attention, a moment of connection where they could share something together. And he discovered, well, then what happens is the other person in the relationship has a choice. Does she engage with it and go see the bird, or does she just keep busy doing what she's doing? I'm reading a book right now, don't bother me, you know? What does she do? And so it might seem like a minor thing, but it turned out that the extent to which these little moments are addressed tells a lot about the health of a relationship. So 6 years later, he goes back and he checks to see how many of these couples are still together and how many of them got divorced. So I'm just checking my notes here because I want to give you the right statistic. Couples who divorced after 6 years had turned towards each other bids only 33% of the time. Only 3 in 10 of their bids, they're asking for the partner to notice something or to think about something or do something. Only 3 in 10 of those requests were met with some kind of connection. The couples who were still together after 6 years had turned towards each other 87% of the time. In other words, 9 out of 10 of their interactions, they were meeting their partner's requests for connection. And those who stayed together, the researcher called them masters. And those that didn't, he called disasters. And he found that there, and I'm just quoting now, there's a habit of mind that the masters have, which is this. They are scanning their social environment or their partner or their friend. They're always kind of looking for things that they can appreciate and say thank you for. They are building a culture of respect and appreciation very purposefully. The disasters, on the other hand, are scanning their environment and their people they're with for mistakes. And so these researchers found that contempt and criticism are the main factors that kill love in a relationship. And this can happen with parents and children too. You know, a kind of criticism, constant nagging. Why don't you pick up your clothes? Can't you ever do anything right? You know, that kind of belittling, critical talk. It kills love in a relationship. People who ignore others in the relationship or respond very minimally, it causes the other person to feel worthless and unseen. And maybe you've had that experience and you know what that's like. But the interesting thing is that kindness and generosity seem to be the glue that holds relationships together and keeps them healthy. And it's useful to think of kindness as kind of like a muscle because it can be developed. Here in Eugene, there's a whole group of people that have like a kindness campaign going on. And it's spreading in other communities around the world too. But there's one of the founders behind it is a guy named Doug Carnine. And he's written a book called How Love Wins, The Power of Mindful Kindness. He's kind of from a Buddhist background. And he couples the whole idea of kindness with the idea of meditation as a tool for healing relationships. And he has worked with a lot of prisoners who have various serious crimes like murder and rape and all those kinds of things. And he has helped even those hardened criminals to change their personalities with kindness. It's quite interesting to read his book. Now, when we're talking about mind and emotions and relationships on the mental and emotional level, one thing that comes up a lot is IQ and EQ. You might have heard of IQ, intelligence quotient, right? And sometimes when we think of IQ, we think it's a fixed thing. You're born with it. That's your IQ. You know, you're stuck with it for life. And basically, it's a test that you take, and it compares you to other people in your age group, and it reflects how well you do in certain intellectual exercises or questions. But the thing is that IQ can be developed too, depending on your environment and the opportunities that you give yourself. You can increase your IQ. Now, have you heard of EQ, your emotional quotient? This has been recently a popular approach. There's a guy named Dan Goleman that's written a book on EQ, emotional quotient. And EQ is a set of learned skills that complements intelligence. It's the ability to identify and manage your emotions and those of others. And it's very interesting. It includes things like self-management, self-awareness, social awareness, and relationship management. But it's very interesting how important it actually is in one's life. And for an example, you probably know people who are brilliant intellectually, but their social skills are non-existent. And, you know, you can think of the typical nerd, right, who is just, He doesn't know how to behave in society. He just is there, but he's great with electronics and things. But they have found that EQ is very important, and that IQ, your intelligence quotient, only contributes to about 20%. It only contributes 20% to your overall success in life. So 80% is how good you are at EQ, what's your emotional quotient. And having a high emotional quotient, a high EQ, helps people build and maintain stable, rewarding relationships. And people with a high EQ do not have a problem with differences of opinion. They can still communicate in affirming ways that minimize conflict. So this is a high EQ person. And the people who are managers who have a high EQ, they're the most successful managers because they know how to deal with people. So to develop a high EQ, you need to acknowledge your emotions, your feelings as something valuable. And you also have to acknowledge other people's emotions and feelings as something valid, valuable. There's a reason somebody's feeling upset. There's a reason someone is sad. There's a reason someone is anxious. There's a reason I'm anxious or I'm upset. And I don't need to just discount it or push it down. I need to experience it. And so one of the things you can do to develop your EQ is when you ask someone, how are you, to really want to know how they are. And when someone asks you, how are you, to really share authentically how you are. If you're really fine, say, I'm fine, I'm great. But if you're not feeling good, say, I'm a little under the weather today, or something. At least it's authentic. And instead of complaining, which is kind of blaming, like they don't care about me, it's like put it in and make I statements. I don't feel appreciated right now. Instead of you don't care about me or you don't care what I feel, right? You say, I don't feel appreciated right now. I don't feel seen right now. And then when other people show emotion, you can accept it and validate it. Yeah, it's good that you're sharing this. I'm with you. I'm just here with you. Let it out, whatever it is. Especially when it's something like people grieving or they're sad, they're experiencing a loss. That's okay for them to be like that. And you just be with them with empathy. And another thing you can do is try to reflect on your emotions and see where they're coming from. Was it from childhood you've reacted in this way? Was it, what is it that's causing you to feel this way towards this person or in this situation? And then learn how to handle your emotions, appropriate emotional behavior, because then you'll be able to handle the emotions of others. Understanding and awareness are the keys to this. And in healthy relationships, awareness and connection are very important. So one of the things I'm hoping that you'll take away from this today is to become more aware of people who are putting out bids for your attention and choose to be with them. Choose to not just say, don't bother me, but choose to pay that moment's attention and give them that connection. Now, we're coming to the spiritual level. I hope I'm going to have enough time here to get through this. What are the signs of a healthy spiritual relationship? So here's another list, okay? First of all, knowing what you believe in and what you value. Knowing what deeply motivates you. And then acting from those principles, from your deeply held values. And living according to them. Don't be a hypocrite. Say you believe in justice, but then you behave unjustly. Say you believe in fairness, but you treat people unfairly. And have a sense of belonging. Cultivate a sense of belonging. Another one is value others for their differences, not despite their difference from you, but be interested in the ways that people are different from you. Also, it's good to have a bigger picture. So see yourself as a player in a larger drama. You know, cultivate a sense of your place in the world, not just in your little own tiny world, but in the world as a whole. Expand your sense of self, because the world is a stage and we're all playing our part in this drama of life. So start to see yourself with that expanded perspective. That's a spiritual perspective. And also, when you're in a situation, try to detach from it, stand back from it, and see the wider context or the bigger picture. And then, of course, the spiritual perspective, when you have problems in relationships, learn to grow from your mistakes. Learn to grow from setbacks. If there's suffering being caused, learn from it. And also, be grateful. Cultivate gratitude and look for ways to give something back to the world that you live in. So, as I was looking at relationships from this perspective of body, mind, and emotions and spirit, I realized that at all levels, we need to increase our awareness and develop our mastery of certain skills in new ways. For example, at the body level, we need to become aware of our unconscious biases, our prejudices. For example, taking that Harvard IAT test. And then we need to work on developing some mastery over our perceptions so that we're not just perpetuating those perceptions. At the mental and emotional level, we need to become aware of our feelings and develop a sense of emotional mastery so that we're just not blurting out things or reacting all the time. And develop the skills so that we can turn criticism and judgmentalism into compassion and empathy and kindness. And then we need to become, at the spiritual level, we need to become aware of our highest and deepest values and develop the courage to live by them. There's a guy, you might remember this from the teacher training, Jabeen. I don't know if I played this video in that training you were in, but it's a guy named Mark Robert Waldman doing a TED Talk. And his talk is about how words can change your brain. And he shows that when you say the word no, your brain is, the dendrites in your brain are actually shriveling up and dying. So sorry for killing a few of your dendrites just then. But when you say the word yes, or when you hold big ideas, it causes those dendrites to grow and to form new neural networks. So don't say no to your children. Find ways to say yes, and find ways to give them a big idea, because that's to give them big ideas. Values are big ideas. Like, try to get them to understand what their values are, and then you're expanding their dendrites. There's another story from this same colleague who was telling about, he's a doctor, so he was telling about another old man who had come in because he'd cut his finger or something, and he had some sutures in it, and he had come to get the sutures out. And he came first thing in the morning to the hospital, and he was kind of in a hurry and impatient, and he kept looking at his watch. And so the doctor, who's examining him and finding that he could take the sutures out, and he starts taking him out. So he says to the old man, "How come you're in such a hurry? Do you have another appointment with another doctor?" And the old man said, "No." He said, I want to go and have breakfast with my wife. She's in a nursing home nearby, and I need to get there by 9 o'clock. And so the doctor asked him some more questions and found out that his wife in the nursing home had Alzheimer's disease. I don't know if you know what Alzheimer's is, but it's a form of dementia that you lose memory. And so the doctor asked him, does she remember, or does she recognize you? And the man said, no. And the doctor said, how long hasn't she been recognizing you? He says, about for the past 5 years. And the doctor is like perplexed, like, you still want to go and have breakfast with her, and you're in a hurry to get there at 9 o'clock for this, and even though she doesn't recognize you? And the old man said, well, she doesn't recognize me, but I know who she is. So this is love. And this is a healthy relationship. Who is that man recognizing? It's not the body or the incapacitated brain. It's the being of his wife that he loves. And he knows that she's still there somewhere, and he wants to be with her. I thought that was a very touching story. Now, I just want you to, I'm going to close up here pretty soon, but I want you to just do one other little thing. I want you to put on your piece of paper a little dot that represents you. And around that dot, I want you to put the members of your family and your friends, and I want you to put them in proximity to that dot as you feel that you're in connection with them in a healthy relationship. So if you're close to them, you're close to somebody, you're going to put it right, that person's dot right next to yours. If you're a little bit more distant, you're going to put that person's dot a little further away, right? So I want you to do this. Put these dots of the people that you know around yourself, your closest friends and family, and then maybe your co-workers, and you know, all the people that come into your mind. Just take a minute and do that. Okay, you done? I can only see Javine, so I can't see anybody else, whether you're done or not, but okay, is everybody done? Yeah? All right. So now I want to know, did anybody put God in that picture? Do you not have a healthy relationship with God? If you didn't put God in that picture, where would you like God to be in that picture? Go ahead and put God in that picture now. Because you see, God is a big idea. And if you work on developing a healthy relationship with God, you are going to be growing megadendrites in your brain. And you will be expanding your capacity to have healthy relationships at all levels and with all other conscient beings in the universe. One of the best definitions of relationships I've heard is that it's the exchange of pure and positive energy between two beings. And it doesn't have anything to do with blood relationships or country or caste or creed. And when there is obstruction or blockage in that relationship, then the bonds get stressed and distorted and fraught with pain. So we really want to cultivate healthy relationships with other beings. And I hope I've given you some pointers to take away tonight that would help you do that. Use do's rather than don'ts. When somebody makes a bid for your attention, consider giving it to them. Develop your EQ by accepting and valuing your feelings, even the negative ones, as well as those of others. Act from your principles and your deepest values. Learn to grow from mistakes and setbacks. Become aware of your biases. Consider developing your relationship with God. Those are a few of the things that I hope you'll take away from tonight. And of course, as you probably know from Jabin, if you want to know more about understanding yourself as a being of consciousness and awareness, and you want to develop that relationship with God, you can do that at any Brahma Kumari center that's near you. So I think there's something in the chat.
Yes, sister. Thank you. We have a question.
Okay.
But I was wondering if you could lead us to a meditation for a few minutes before we start with the question and answer.
Okay. How much time do we have? Am I gone over time?
No. It's good. We still have another 10 minutes.
Okay. So take this moment to withdraw your awareness inside yourself. Just ignore all the little flickering Zoom boxes in front of you and just tune in to yourself for a moment, as though you're alone in the room you're in. And ask yourself, what is my deepest, most cherished value? The value that I always try to live by. What is that? Notice that that value isn't anything physical. It could be love, could be truth, could be wisdom, could be peace, could be compassion. These are the values at the core of our existence as human beings. that give meaning and purpose to our life, that set us above the other species. And if we choose to live by this deepest value, which has been given to us in trust, we didn't create it, we just accepted it. And if we choose to live by this value, whatever it is, it will light the way towards improving our relationship with the self, with others, other beings, and especially with the Supreme. So cherish that value, appreciate it, and let it give you renewed purpose in your life. Om Shanti.
Thank you, sister. That was really nice. So what we can do is also use that on a daily basis, like work on different values. For example, let's work on compassion today and another one and enhance it on a daily basis. There were a lot of good points that you brought up, a lot of points that are eye-opening. We need to practice this. And also what you said, that kindness is a muscle that we can develop by practicing it. We have a question here. It is on kindness.
Okay.
Kindness is a very beautiful word and experience. Some do not believe in it at all by looking at the material world or witnessing unfortunate experiences in life of self and others. What would be a good holistic attitude or actions for the self when being around or meeting souls like that?
Well, I think you have to practice kindness towards them. And, you know, they may mock you for it, but why be dissuaded by that? If you're kind in the face of their disbelief, if you're kind to them, regardless of how they're treating you, eventually they'll have to see the value of kindness. This is what this guy did in the prisons. He just, he was kind to people, and nobody had ever been kind to them before. And he was genuinely kind. It wasn't false, you know, superficial kindness. He really genuinely cared for the people, and so he was kind to them. And I think unless and until we walk the talk of kindness and bring kindness, first of all, towards ourselves, sometimes we're not very kind to ourselves. We have this little voice in our head that berates ourselves. Oh, you stupid, why did you do that again? Can't you remember where you left your keys? You know, the way we talk to ourselves sometimes, and I'm as guilty of it as anyone, doesn't show a lot of kindness sometimes, and I have to catch myself in those times and treat myself like a little child who just made a mistake. It's okay, you'll be okay. You know, be kind to yourself, and then you'll start being kind to others and accepting their mistakes. Like that son who took his father out to dinner. What a kind thing to do, and to care for him so much. Um, so I think this is the only thing we can do, is to be kind to them.
Yeah, there is just a comment on that, that thank you for such a great talk. So many things to practice and contemplate. Your first story of the man and the sun touched my heart.
Mm-hmm.
True selfless love.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And coming back to what you just said, there is a question on that. How do we learn to love ourselves in order to overcome being needy in relationships?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and it's a very deep question, because the interesting thing is, we know what love is because we know when we don't have it. And we know what peace is because we know when we're peaceless. We know what compassion and kindness are. And the only reason we know those things is that we must have experienced them before. It's in our DNA. We know what those things are. So what's happened is that we've become empty. We have, and if you go to the meditation center, you will learn and understand more about why and how this all happened. But many of our belief systems teach us that we were, born into a heavenly situation, and then something happened and we were cast into outer darkness, right? And it's true in a way. We have been on an eternal journey. The spirit is immortal. It's been on its eternal journey for a long time. And in the course of that journey, our consciousness, because spirit is consciousness, our consciousness has become more and more preoccupied with material things, with temporary things, with things that gratify the senses but not the spirit. And as a result, inside the spirit has become empty. And we're trying to fill that emptiness with things like food or fun or whatever, but it's never getting filled. It's just becoming a bigger hole. And so when we start to realize that there is this emptiness inside and that we don't see anything in ourselves to love, we have to remember that we know what love is, that we experienced it before, and we have to start being loving. And it's funny that even if you have hardly any love or any feeling for anybody, but if you just do start by doing a little act of kindness, you'll find a little happiness comes from that. And then you want to do more things, and you find more ways, and your happiness increases, and your love for yourself increases. And you find that you do have a capacity for caring for yourself. You do have a sweet side. You do have a compassionate side. And you start noticing that sometimes you are there for other people. You do, sacrifice things for the sake of others and help people. And so why not love yourself for that? And then if you have God in your life, you have to know that God loves you unconditionally, because that's who God is. God is love and an ocean of love. And if God can love you, why can't you love yourself? So there must be something lovable about you, and your job is just to find it out. It's not about becoming arrogant that I'm so good I now love myself. But it's with humility, realizing that I'm a human being like everyone else. I have positive traits, I have shortcomings, but I'm valuable. I hold in trust a deep value, that whether it's fairness or kindness or compassion or whatever it is, that's my mission for the world. That's the gift I bring to the world, is living according to that value and letting it shine forth from my life. So that's something I can love about myself, is it not? And I wouldn't be sitting here taking this course or listening to this class if there wasn't something deep inside me that loves spirituality or loves wisdom or loves the divine, whatever you want to call it. So have faith in that and let yourself love yourself for that. I hope that helps.
Thank you. That is indeed very nice. Very nice is what we need to see, is how we need to see ourselves, that God loves us. It's a very nice, beautiful point. Thank you, Sister Kiran, once again for joining us today and sharing a lot of thoughts that we need to work on, we need to ponder upon. And I'm
Well,
sure all the participants today have taken their notes and will definitely work on this. I'm sure I am going to.
okay, I'd love to see you all, but I still don't suppose, I don't know if you're too shy to put on your videos, but it'd be nice to see you, at least to say goodbye.
Yeah.
Okay, here you are. Otherwise, it's interesting talking to flickering names.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us today. Our next session will be on Saturday, the 7th of November. We have also a very good speaker joining us. So do let me know if I've dropped my number on the chat box. Do let me know if you're interested and I can send you the details. Thank you very much. Have a nice weekend.
Okay,
Thank you, sister. Om Shanti.